Today we're going to be doing another animation video, in-depth animation. That's pretty much, I guess, maybe a series, I don't know. I mean, I did say an in-depth animation video. I'm not entirely sure what that would entail, so I have this character here for you that is pretty popular on the Dreamverse, you could say, and we're going to be doing character animations today, like idle animations, just even how to make custom walking animations, etc. So, first things first is we're going to go over how puppet animations work in general when it comes to just the whole structure. I'm not entirely sure if this carries over to what I'm about to show you, but or what we will do later in this video, which is making like fully custom animations, not procedural stuff. So if we go ahead and open up the properties of our puppet here, you get all these tweaks here which deal with basic movement and stuff, and this is moreover for like how the character controls on this first page, but I believe, okay, so this is what we're going to be looking at first off. So this right here is actually what defines what the character looks like when they are doing certain actions, like for example walking, running, jumping, like ascent, so that's when you start, jump apex, so that's when you're like idling in the air, and then when you're about to hit the ground, that's descent basically. And if we go ahead and click on these, depending on your character, like if you're using the basic character you might not get all of these, but it's easy to add them in later on. But you can see that each button makes a different pose on our character here, and the position of our limbs actually do greatly affect the animation. So if I go ahead and keep playing and then go to run, if I were to, for example, delete this keyframe data on her hands and arms and stuff, we're gonna see much different result than when we did have the data, as you can see. So it's basically like that for all procedural animation. So if we go over to upper body movement, or actually lower body movement, this actually is what controls the look of the movement. And some of you may be adjusting these settings and not realizing that the run quick edit, this keyframe here, it's a keyframe in the puppet settings, which would be in here. It's that green one in here. That's the keyframe that activates when you hit this quick edit button. But some of you may not realize is that this keyframe is actually modifying this settings of the puppet as well. So motion sensor, lean lag, sassiness, sway, everything in here is modified by this keyframe, as you can see. So if you're adjusting these settings and you're not seeing the change you want on your puppet, it's because you're probably only doing the walk settings. So the walk animation is going to look different than your run animation. So if we go ahead and look at this and the run animation as well, let's say I want way more sway, less stiffness, let's see, springiness? No. Way more sassiness. There we go. And then we go to the run. You can see that the settings are changed. So if we want to bring it back to really sassy, we can do that. in the run settings, as well as bring down the lumberingness and increase the sway. It's kind of crazy, as you can see. But that's the basics of the movement of your puppet. There's a lot of stuff in here that you can tweak. For example, foot separation is how far apart the feet are. So this is maximum. So that now it's walking like a cat, as you can see. When the feet come in steps, it'll walk like on a tightrope. And then the maximum is a very wide step. Then lean into strength. That is basically, that's only really visible when you're playing, but a lot of people don't like it. But it's, I kind of messed up this puppet here, but it basically kind of looks like you're being pulled along by strings rather than just moving. So if you don't like that, you can turn off this. Bicycle feet. I'm not really sure how to explain that. Most of these have tooltips if you just hover over it. So if you like reset this to default when we're running, yeah, it ups the bicycle feet a lot, as you can see. So yeah, and there's also T-Rex tread, but that's for like bigger puppets only apparently. So now if we actually open up the logic here, we can get started with some more complicated stuff. For example, if we wanted to do an idle animation, what does an idle animation entail? Well, depending on the animation, it'll either just be a short clip that plays and then they'll go back to standing still like normal, or they'll, in case of Mario goes to sleep and like he enters the animation with going onto the floor and then it loops and then he gets straight back up when you start moving. So that would be an intro animation and a looping animation. Now an intro would basically be one timeline. The loop timeline would be just another timeline that loops, and as soon as the intro timeline is completed, it will trigger something to allow the looping timeline to play. So now that I've explained that, and you can also have an exit animation as well, which would play after a trigger, which would just be any input basically, and the loop was playing. It will cancel the loop and then play that outro animation and then just completely end, like it's a play once type of timeline. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Let's do a loop and an intro. So we can do, let's see, microchip. We'll place one of these down from our logic and processing section. This is just going to be another idle, or this is going to be idle animations. And let's give it, I don't know, what would be night? That's a good color. Alright. And what we want is, we want to know if the player is not doing anything. So basically we want to just get an input here that tells us that no buttons are being pressed or no movement is happening. Well, or we're not firing basically. So what we can do here is we have our controller logic in this puppet specifically, and what we're going to want to do is I'm going to go ahead and name this node here as inactive, and we want to get basically just a on or off state from this. So what we can do is we're going to go ahead and get a NOT gate from the logic and processing section. And we're going to stamp it down in our controller logic here. And we're also going to get two calculators. For now, we want to just copy this. One of them is going to be a absolute value, which basically will take any number, negative or positive, and turn it positive. So we're going to go ahead and get the left stick, that output, since it's doing something. And we're going to plug that into our absolute value calculator. So this is going to tell us if our stick is doing anything at all. And then we're going to go ahead and plug that into our NOT gate. And then we're going to go ahead and do the motion sensor as well. We'll plug that into the operand of the calculator for the absolute value as well. Then we're going to have the circle button go directly into the NOT gate, and the X button go into the NOT gate. Then in here, we want this to be equals to 1. So B is going to be 1. You can do L1 and square to directly set it with the keyboard. So this calculator, basically we're asking if our NOT gate is completely powered on. Because if we use the stick, it'll go down not entirely if we're not pushing against it completely. So we just want to know if there's no input at all. So we want an absolute value of 1. And then we're going to go ahead and plug this result of the calculator into our node over here, into our idle animation. And now we know when the player is not moving around or is inactive. And now we can do logic to play an idle. So usually an idle animation will play after about 30 seconds to a minute, or at least in my experience. So I think we're going to go with, for now, just for testing, we're going to do 5 seconds, because that's going to be the quickest result to see. So we're going to place down a timer from our logic processing section, and if you want it longer than 5 seconds, you're going to want to set the target time to whatever time that would be. And we're going to go ahead and drag this over a little bit. And we also want to know when we are active, basically. So that's really easy. We're just going to get a NOT gate and then plug our inactive output into our NOT gate here. And now we know that we are active. And then I'm actually going to type that in because it's pretty easy. If you label your circuits like this, it's actually very helpful. So now we know that if we're inactive or if we're active, and when we are active, we want to go ahead and reset this timer, and we also want to make it so we have to be active and we have to be inactive for this timer to go. So we're going to go and plug into that from our node here. So now, after about 5 seconds, we're going to go ahead and complete our timer. And that will output here in timer finished in the properties as the very last option, and it's a direct output telling us that this timer is finished doing whatever it's doing. Okay, and since we have that, we can go ahead and activate an animation. So I'm going to go ahead and make it a posed animation. So basically we're going to go into a pose, and then we're going to go ahead and loop through that pose. And since it's just a pose, we don't actually need a second timeline, but I will show off how to do it. But we just need the pose keyframe itself. So we're going to go ahead and start off by placing down a timeline, if you haven't already, from our animate menu. We want to open up this and make the playback mode be once. And then we're going to go ahead and, let's see here, we want a keyframe. Go ahead and place that down. And it's going to start recording immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and scope into our puppet here. And I want just them to put their hand on their waist. Excuse me, yes. That's what I want. So I'm going to go ahead and start positioning stuff like I would expect it to look. You don't really need that many keyframes, but if you want it to look really nice, you would want more keyframes than just a couple. So we got our first keyframe here, and I'm gonna go ahead and make it last for about quarter second, and I'm gonna fade in with the fader here. And we talked about this in our last video. If you have not seen it already, I would suggest watching my animation basics. I made a video, that was my very last video, so if you're just watching this one that came out, you should be able to find it pretty easily in my uploads. Otherwise, I will try to put a link in the description, probably remember. Okay, so we got our first keyframe here, and now we're going to go ahead and get our second one. We know it doesn't take that long to put our hand at our waist, so let's go ahead and actually copy this first keyframe. And I'm going to go ahead and shrink it back down. And then I'm doing L and X to change the blend between the two keyframes to a linear blend. And now I'm going to go ahead and put our hand on our waist. Like so. And probably want our arm to go back a little bit like so. Alright. Now that we have that, let's see how that looks. It's not... Okay, and we know that we're going to have this keyframe afterwards. So I'm just going to extend it a little bit. Have the animation end like so. And now, basically, we just have this timeline as this intro. So we're going to go ahead and name it as intro. And we want this keyframe because that's our pose that we're going to go ahead and idle at. And I said I was going to do it on a timeline, so I'll go ahead and bring down a timeline, and we're going to set it to loop. And I'm going to go ahead and just put this keyframe in here. I'll just make it a second long and bring it all the way back until we get that dotted line. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do the logic now. So when this is finished, we're going to play this intro, and then when this intro is finished, we want to continuously play our loop, and then when we are no longer inactive, we want to go ahead and cancel out of all our animations. So that's pretty easy. Well, how do we make a constant signal after a short signal? Well, we can do a counter. So counter is going to go ahead and give us an on state, and that on state is going to come from our intro, because when our intro animation is done, we want to play our loop. So we're going to go ahead and get the output of our timeline property here on end trigger. So this basically, when the timeline reaches the very end and it's done playing, it will output on end trigger, just a flash, like a tick, a second basically. That's a pulse right here, and we want to play this intro on the timer pulse as well when the timer is finished. So when we are idle, we're going to go ahead and play the intro, and then when the intro is done, we're going to toggle our counter on here, and that's going to go ahead and play our loop. Now when we are active, we want to go ahead and reset our counter so we don't play the loop animation anymore for idle. And I believe this should work now. Go ahead and play Yep. And as you can see, we're looping on here. So if you had an animation that you wanted to loop, this is what you would do. Is just have it like this, and then if we were to play, actually, with our character, I'm gonna go in idle. I think maybe my controller input, we did the gyroscope or something, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's not gonna play because we had the, yeah, let's not have the lean motion sensor output detected, because that's always going to be on no matter what we do. Yep, there we go. And if we move, the animation cancels and we're no longer idling. There we go. So that's how you do an idle animation. Now we're going to do the complicated stuff. So if this is all you were here for, was the idle animation, then I feel envious of you, because now I have to go ahead and do somewhat of a custom animation. So for puppets are not entirely what you think they are. Puppets are very complicated and advanced pieces of logic in dreams. They are logic, they aren't anything else than that. Then some models hooked together with some connectors and logic. So the game engine itself is what processes all of this movement and animation stuff. So basically, the game engine, like Unity, would process this on custom written code for you in Unity. So Media Molecule has made a character controller, which is a technical term in game design for anything that would control a character. And a character can be anything from like a vehicle to an actual like humanoid, or just like a paddle and Pong. That's what a character controller would be. So this character controller is for a humanoid, particularly a bipedal humanoid. And you can see here in the structure page that it's asking for all the bones. Well, that's what they would be called in a game engine, is bones. So you get different selections, and what the game does is, using a algorithm, is generate animations for walking as well as looking around like this. And part of it is called inverse kinematics. So now that we have procedural walk turned off, if we go ahead and play, you can see nothing really happens, but the body is affected by gravity and stuff. That is part of the procedural animation. So if you wanted to keep that on, you could. And procedural animation also does the leaning. So if we turn off the lean with procedural animation, I mean, if we turn off procedural animation, you turn off the lean. Like, I'm all over the place with my controller right now. I guess some of the motion of the arms and stuff is from the connectors not being stiff enough, but procedural animation does the look at, does the leaning, and all that kind of stuff. So depending on what you want, like for example, if you have like R2-D2 or I don't know, what else would be a good example for this? I'm not sure, but if you have anything that's not humanoid and you want to use the puppet movement, because this is very well designed and this is expensive for a reason. Like, if you weren't, like, that's not a good example because the stuff, but if we get just a regular puppet here, you can see it's 2% gameplay. Most of that 2% that stacks is from the this which is technically this stand right here. And the rest of the gameplay thermo from that is actually just the connectors, basically. Everything else is really cheap. Specifically, the models themselves are cheap. The connectors can be expensive, but in reality, like, the puppet system itself kind of breaks when you have like 20 or more puppets in one scene. So it would be recommended to use just the puppet thing for anything that's controllable by a player. If you want like NPCs or AI, and you are competent enough to make your own animation, then you would probably want to do your own animation and just the connectors, and if you wanted to make it even cheaper, you could delete the connectors. But that's not really what this is about. We're trying to get our own custom walk animation. So I believe, even though we have our procedural walk turned off, what we can do here is this puppet interface is what allows us to get information about this puppet logic from behind the scenes that the engine is doing. So I went ahead and copied it from our controller logic, but you can also find it in your gameplay gear section in your logic. It's the very last gadget. And this puppet interface has inputs that allow you to make the puppet move. For example, jump, walk, turn to face, lean, go forwards, go backwards. And there's also outputs, like tells us if the puppet jumped, tells us if the puppet landed, tells us if we double jumped, tells us if it thinks we're about to hit the ground, tells us the distance to the ground, tells us if we're on the ground. And then we also have the third page, which is outputting the velocity, outputting how fast the acceleration is or deceleration, lean speed, upper body movement, lower body movement, foot scrape, jump ascent, jump peak, jump descent. And these are what actually trigger the animations here. And you can also see the run animation gets triggered by running strength. So I think, depending on what you're doing, for example, if I'm right, okay, so I'm not. If they were to make it easy on us, if we have procedural walk output, running strength would just be a direct tap into how fast we're going, but since it's not, what we want to do is we want to do some complicated stuff, basically. So if we go ahead and open up our gadgets menu, we're going to go ahead and get a microchip, and this is going to be custom animation, custom walking. Custom walk. And that's all I'm going to be able to do, because I'm not actually a professional animator, so I'm not going to... Any animation that I make with this is not going to look good, but it's going to look, I don't know, presentable. I mean, I've done animation for critters before that looks decent enough, so I'm going to go ahead and place it on a timeline, and we want to go ahead and make this loop, because when you're walking, you loop. And let's see, let's get the logic to actually trigger the animation first, because it's going to be a bit easier. So we just want to get the puppet's speed, and if we are running or if we're walking. So there's a few methods we could do. We could just get our input from our left stick, or we could get how fast we're going directly, or we could get or we could be really precise about it. So I'm going to try to be as precise as possible. So I got our puppet interface from our gameplay gear, and open up the properties of this, and I believe, let's see here, running, walking, strength, on ground, velocity. I believe velocity is what we're going to be able to use. So if we go ahead and get a, I think, if we get a splitter from our logic and processing section, you can see that we have A, B, and C. This is actually X, Y, and Z. I don't know why they chose A, B, and C. Probably because it's just 3 numbers, technically. But, X, Y, and Z. So, X is left and right, and Z is backwards and forwards, and B is up and down. So basically, what we want to do is we want to just get if we're moving left or right, or forward and backward. So, I think if we actually just got if we got something else, which is sensors and input, movement sensor, this is going to also get our speed. And we can do local space, and then Z direction is going to be going forward. So if we do this, we should just get, like, from walking. This isn't going to include strafing, so if you want a custom strafing animation, you could do X. Y is up and down, so that would get your how fast you're jumping or falling. So we just want to get Z, which is going forward, which is going to be easiest for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get a calculator, and we want to say if our speed is greater than 0, then we want to go ahead and play the animation. So I'm going to go ahead and get velocity, Z-axis, and then plug that into operand 1 of the calculator, and again we're doing greater than, and then B is 0. So if this speed is greater than 0, then we want to go ahead and play our animation. And we can also control the speed of the animation. So what we can do here is we know you can do a couple things for this. You can either directly output from the puppet, so you can change them whenever you want and not have to dig into the settings, but since I know I'm not going to change these. 5.5 meters a second is the maximum speed that we have, and 2 meters a second is the maximum walk speed. So theoretically, we could do a run speed for this, which would mean that we're making a run animation and we slow it down when we walk. Or I could just turn off the run completely and just have the walk animation, which I'm gonna do because I'm lazy and don't want to do 2 sets of animations. So we're gonna go ahead and open up our calculator here, and when we want to divide this value by 2, our speed by 2, because we know that the maximum speed is going to be 2. So we know that A divided by B is going to get us a value from 0 to 1. Technically, if you were to go faster, then you're going to get like 1.5 or something, but we know that this is going to control the speed of our animation, because if we go ahead and open up our timeline here, we can go ahead and output our calculator here into playback speed. Now by default it's going to be overwrite for blend mode. We want to actually do L1 and X twice to get modulate. So what that's going to do is going to multiply our playback speed by the value here from our calculator. So we're basically slowing down or speeding up our animation depending on how fast we're going. And now we just want to plug in this calculator here to see if we're actually moving, and we're going to go ahead and plug that into our timeline to turn it on. So now, actually, another thing that we can do before we actually just plug it directly in is if we were to just have it turn off, it's going to be pretty janky, but you can use a signal manipulator here for a logic processing section, and these can be pretty intimidating to basic logic people, but all you have to do is plug in our calculator here into the signal manipulator and then open up the properties, and the lower level this is, like power wise, the less the animation strength. So for example, if you were to animate the character on the left side of the screen and to the right of the screen. So by default the character's right here, but when the keyframe is turned on it's right here. If you turn it on like halfway, the character is actually going to only move halfway. So that same thing applies to animations on the body itself. So what we're going to do is go ahead and make smooth fall about half a second. So that way, when we stop moving, the animation is going to slowly power off. And then we're going to go ahead and plug that into our timeline. Alright, and now we're actually going to try to make a walk cycle. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in a keyframe here. And now I'm going to go ahead and just tab into our puppet. And I'm not going to do the easy, or not the easy method, but the method I showed where you only do the rotational data, because that's going to be just so much time and I don't need it that professional. So we're going to start with our right foot, and we're going to go ahead and have a frame where the feet are just straight on the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and just make a bunch of copies of this, like so. And just add that blending between them, because I want to be able to animate like this. So if we hold down L1 and then the D-pad in one direction, it'll go to the next or previous keyframe. So now I can edit them at my leisure, and we can also get some preview of what the animation will look like. So I know that it looks like an arc basically, so we're going to go ahead and bring up our foot like this, and then next frame we're going to go ahead and bring it forward like this, and let's make it a bit less exaggerated, and then the next frame it's going to be back like that. And this whole time when, okay, so we know that when this foot goes up, this foot is going to be going back technically, I believe. So that foot goes up, this foot goes down, then this foot goes up, and then this foot goes forward. Then back, and then this one goes up. So, I believe we might already have a loop here. I mean, it's not going to look very good, but oh, you know what? I think I know what I'm doing wrong. If we go ahead and do halfway, maybe. Halfway. No. Okay. Okay. And now we do halfway, like so. This frame, I do not want like that. So we do walk, 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 and then this one is actually like so. Then this frame is forward, like so. And you know what? I am quite silly, aren't I? Okay, and then this one is back. I'm not sure how this is going to look at all, by the way. So this is our last frame, is it? Yes, okay. So, and that's also our first frame. And our last frame. Yes, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that keyframe, put this keyframe here, and now we should have a really bad walking animation. Basically. Okay, well that little extra motion that I did at the end was not worth it, I think. I don't know. Maybe, I think, what we want. We want this frame onward to be really short. Like really, really short. Like this. Let's see if that's any better. No? Okay. So I'm just gonna try deleting these keyframes and see if it looks good. Kind of. Looks better than before. Let's see what we're doing wrong. Or try to. Well, that one still has that backward stroke, and we don't want that. Very basic walk animation that does not look entirely well. I wonder if we can shorten this at all. I don't think so. Tried to make this keyframe even smaller than it is. Oh, I can! Huzzah! And then we'll do the same for this one. Huzzah! I don't know if then we'll do anything, but kind of. And we can also add some CS to this, so hip sway like so. Well, that's not gonna work now, is it? Okay, so this first frame is nothing. Next, well, second frame is this way. Next frame's nothing. Next frame's this way. Next frame's that way. I don't know. That's gonna do something. Okay. I don't know what this is doing wrong. Okay. Oh, it's that extra frame that I'm talking about. Yes, okay. Well, I believe it's better than nothing as an animation. Okay, well, yeah, that's my very terrible walk cycle. I hope you liked it. Now, did I want to talk about anything else in this video? Well, it is already 37 minutes long. But I did want to show you how to do this one last thing. I mean, whoever's probably wanted to see this probably not care or haven't been watching, so, but this running pose parameters thing, if we go ahead and activate this, and then click on that, that's what actually links it. So if I were to delete this keyframe, or yeah, if I delete this keyframe, and then you can see this button does nothing now. But if I add a new keyframe here, and turn on this run quick edit, and then stop recording, it should, well no, I swear that did it before. What if I plug it into the running strength? And then do stuff. Like so. What now? Okay, well, I guess that's how you do it. That's how you sync it up. Not just press that, but also change a setting 1 and run. But yeah, there you go. I am not going to publish this as a scene because it's just really, really simple, and also because my animation work on this is not what I want it to be, because I wanted to do it really quickly for a tutorial video. So this is what the character I used was. Potts character series #1 base female. As you can see, just searched up anime, so you know. I hope you all liked the video. If you want to see something specific for animation, go ahead and comment down below. Just leave a comment in general. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I have a Patreon if you want to support me on that. It helps me a lot. So even just with the amount that I have now, it helps. So if you want to join my super secret Discord server, then you can go ahead and do that if you want to be part of that. So yeah, bye. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.